Okay, so now before we start breaking down the lesson, what I want to do is I want to talk about basically the analysis of the progression and also how you would use this progression. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is I'm obviously not using the piano, I'm using the organ, right? Okay? And you might say, right off the bat, you might think, forget it. You know, this is an organ lesson, I'm not interested in that. You know, I can't use any of these techniques. I hope that you don't do that because you'll be wrong to do that, and I'll tell you why. All of these chords and the bass line can easily be translated to piano. And in fact, the chords, you can play them exactly the same way in the same location, right? So these voicings work well for both organ and for piano. Now, there's certain things that happen with organ, which we'll get into later on in the lesson, especially when we start talking about improvisation, which we probably won't get to in this lesson. It's going to probably have to be another lesson because we got a lot to get through with the bass line and all the chords and the comping. But there's some specific organ type things that, you know, happen because we're on an organ, like being able to hold a note down. You know, like that kind of stuff. Of course, you know, you can't really do that on a piano. But the progression, the bass line, the chords, the comping, all works on piano. So do yourself a favor and check it out, even if you're not interested in playing organ. Now, let's talk about this progression, right? You know, there's many different progressions that we can utilize. We can take a look at a song and utilize the progression from songs. So we just got done doing the Someone to Watch Over Me. We could take that, you know. We could take that progression and improvise over that, make a bass line over that, yada yada. Okay, we could take rhythm changes, you know, like that kind of stuff. Use that progression. We could use a blues progression as well. You know, just a 1, 4, and 5. We don't always have to use that big long progression. Sometimes using a short, let's say smaller progression, okay, is actually really nice because it gives us a great vehicle to improvise over. Now, you're going to hear me refer to bluesy progressions. And a bluesy progression in my mind, okay, this is going to be different. You know, this is not a real technical term here. Not everyone is going to use this. But if I talk to another musician and say, yeah, it's kind of a bluesy thing, is you know, 3, 6, 2, 5s in it, they're going to kind of know what I'm talking about right off the bat. So a bluesy progression means, you know, we're going to hit a 1 chord. It's probably going to be a dominant 7th chord, and we're going to go to a 4 chord and another dominant 7th chord, and at some point we might hit that 5 chord, but we might throw some other chords in between. It's exactly what happens here. It does not follow a set blues progression. All right. Let me go through here and also put in the measure numbers. Okay, so we'll have that in there. Okay, so if we take a look, 19, 20, 21, 22, it's basically like a 24 measure piece that we have here. So it's not a stock, you know, 12 bar blues. All right, so let's talk about the chords. You're going to see in here there's some other chords like, you know, some tritone substitution chords. Those chords I'm going to strip away for right now. How are you going to know which ones are the tritone substitutions? Well, they're the ones that are happening on the and of 3 or beat 4 or the and of 4. Those are the ones that are happening just before the next chord change. So really we start with an F7 chord. That's our chord on measure 1. Then we go to B flat 7. For measure 2. And then it goes A minor 7, D7, I'm putting in the flat 9, G minor 7, C7, and just keeps doing that. A minor, D, G, C, A minor, D, G, C, until finally then we get to this F, A flat, G, G flat, and an F. And then we end it with this nice little gospel-esque kind of like, you know, so we get that nice gospel, you know, gospel flavor turnaround at the end. Now, I'm just going to turn on my AC here because it's a little bit warm. The F chord to B flat, that's our 1 chord to our 4 chord. Pretty stock there, pretty straight up basic. the A minor 7 to the D7, the G minor 7 to the C7. Let's talk the G minor 7 to the C7 because that's actually the easier one. G minor 7 to C7 is the 2 chord moving to the 5 dominant 7th chord. So I could go F to B flat to G to C, and I just keep doing that over and over. Right? So I could utilize that. I could play those chords one beat apiece, so there's, I'm sorry, one measure apiece, so that would be 4 measures, and I could just improvise over that. Sorry. I'm just going to B flat 7, G minor, C, F, B flat, G minor, C7. So I could keep going over and over and over with it. Problem is though, it kind of gets a little bit, okay, it's just 4 chords. I mean, nice to expand that. So what I do is instead put a 3-6 in front of that 2-5. Okay, let's slow that down for a second. The 3-6 is A minor 7 to D. Now, typically, the 6th chord would be a minor chord, okay? But in this case, I'm playing it as D7. Listen to what happens if I played it as minor. So F to B flat to A minor, D minor, G minor, C7. Hear how it loses some of its bluesiness, whereas if I go F, B flat, A minor, D7, that nice bite, especially with that flat 9, which resolves down to the 5th of the G minor. I can do flat 9 of C as well, and that resolves down to the 5th of F. So those flat 9s are kind of cool on those dominant 7th chords. They resolve nicely down a half step. But anyway, you hear that D7 sounds really nice and kind of, again, kind of bluesy, gives it a little bit more of a bite. So typically, what we would call that is we would call that a 5-7 of 2. So the real analysis of the song would be 1-7 to 4-7, F7 to B flat 7, and then in measure 3, A minor 7 would be 3 minor 7, measure 4, D7 would be 5-7 of 2, and then that resolves, it's a dominant chord, and it resolves to the 2 chord, which is in measure 5, G minor 7, which then resolves to the 5 chord, C7 in measure 6. That would be deceptive. We'd put brackets around that analysis because the C7 does not resolve to the F7, does it? Instead, it resolves to the A minor, which is 3, and then D7 is 5-7 of 2, G is 2, C is 5, and it keeps doing that for, how many times does it do it actually? A to G, A, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 4 times. So it does that whole progression A, D, G, C 4 times, right? So why do I say 6? I say 6 because it's easier. There's really no magic to it. I would say 6, 7, but don't think you really have to know your theory on this. I see, players on YouTube, they talk about, 7/3 progressions. In like when you're talking with other musicians that aren't in that stylistic realm, just like if you're like doing pickup gigs with like jazz musicians, I'll do gigs in which I just met the guy or the girl, on the gig. So we've never played before. If they start talking like this language, like, oh yeah, it's a 3/7 kind of thing, like we won't know what's going on. So you have to know your theory and you have to know it properly to make sure that you're able to speak that language. So it's almost like a doctor coming in and working with another doctor, but they call like a scalpel, like, I don't know, bada. It's like, well, what is that? You want to make sure you're speaking the same language. So D7, we would normally call it a 5-7 of 2, but for brevity, I'd call it a 6-7. So this is where I say it's a 3-6-2-5. And if I was explaining this to you on a gig, I'd say it goes 1 to 4, it's a 3-6-2-5. The 6th chord, the D7 chord is a 5-7 chord. Okay, and then you would hear it. And that's the other thing too. Also, you'd be able to hear it. You'd hear the difference between that and that. That dominant sound versus the minor sound. Okay, so finally that gets us to that F, A flat, G, C, and then G flat. That's really just tritone substitutions. So the F, right, to the A flat 7, right? What is that? is the tritone for D, isn't it? Okay? See how A flat's the tritone for D? So it's really like F to D to G to C, which I could do that as well. That's a nice pattern right there. D, I'm putting in the sharp 9. G7 with the sharp 11. C7 altered with the sharp 9, the flat 9. And throw in the flat 13 in there as well. Okay? So rather than going D, I go to the tritone, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 half steps away. Still a dominant 7th chord. Notice, hello, chord is exactly the same in the right hand, isn't it? D7 with a sharp 9 or A flat 7. Okay? You pick your poison. If I do that, it's, well, actually, what chord did I write up? A flat 7 with the sharp 11. And I go to that G7, the sharp 11. And then G flat 7, well, G flat is the tritone of what? Pause the video, figure it out. Okay, so G flat, go 6 half steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. G flat 7 is the tritone substitution of C. So basically, it's again F to D to G to C, right? So rather than doing just D and C, instead I replace those with a chord that is a tritone away. Remember, that's what the tritone substitution means. It's just a chord that's a tritone away, 6 half steps away, right? Could I do that on the G chord? Well, sure, absolutely. What's the tritone of G? It would be D flat. So I can go F, A flat, D flat, G flat, and then the F. Okay? So that then brings us to the F, the A, to the B flat. This is really a 1 to a 4 chord. Right? This is a real common, just nice groove. The A is just putting that the third in the bass and going to that B flat 7. I just played a real basic B flat 7 here. So I have and I just end on my F7 chord. So the real crux of the progression is that 3, 6, 2, 5 progression, just going over and over and over and over again, right? This is a great progression to try and bring into other keys because it's an easy progression. If I did it, let's say in the key of B flat, be 1 up to 4, and then 3, 6, right? It's really a dominant 7th chord, remember? 2, 5, 3, 6, 2, 5, 3, 6, 2. Tritone substitution of the 5, going to B7, then back to B flat. So that allows me to have this progression now in any key. Whatever key I need to play it, I'm playing a D. Go in D. I want to move into another key. How can I utilize that progression? Well, you know what? I could just go into that progression. Remember, I could start a song. Let's say I'm doing a blues in the key of F. I don't have to stay on the blues progression when I improvise. Just got to fix this chord. I don't have to stay on that progression. I can move into another progression. Especially if I'm playing solo piano, I can do pretty much whatever I want. So I can move right into a progression like this. So that having these progressions in the back of your head that you could pull these out and then play bass line and comping, and eventually, like I said, in another lesson we'll get into the improv. That's a great skill to have, all right? So anyway, hope that explains what this progression is and how you can utilize it. I'll see you in the next chapter and we'll start breaking it down.